Good morning, guys. Appreciate everyone coming on this morning. But thought there was something really need to talk about before we get started. Obviously with the George Floyd verdict last night. So I just think it's you guys know me that I'm not a prepared statement type of person and doing stuff. But I just think it's important for me to organize my thoughts, and I wanted to put them down after the last few hours. And like everyone, kind of dealing with what transpired yesterday. So yesterday's verdict was a very emotional day for many. For me as an African American, there was a sense of relief and sadness. George Floyd was senselessly taken from family and friends. His story was one of many that have taken place in our communities over the years. It's 2021, and yet people of color are still asking for equality and justice. The jury in Minnesota served notice that police brutality is unacceptable and people will be held accountable for their actions. We as a people should all be touched by the raw emotions of joy and relief by the verdict. The justice system worked for people of color yesterday. However, we cannot forget that a life was lost. I am proud of the work our organization has done in the South Florida community over the years, led by Steve Ross, Tom Garfinkel, and Brian Flores. Our players are actively out in the community trying to make a real difference. There's a lot of work to still be done in terms of reform and equality. We will continue to do more and ask others to do so as well across the NFL. We have the opportunity to make things better for everyone in our country. There are a lot of good people that want to make a difference. It's encouraging to hear and see the number of white people in big companies willing to be uncomfortable and speak out against systematic racism. There are a lot of good law enforcement officials who want change for the better. These are good men and women who uphold their oaths. We need to support them as well. We have made tremendous advancements in our way of life except for dealing with race. It's not just people of color being affected. Look at what's happening with all the hate being directed towards the Asian community right now. I am hopeful, but not naive to think that this verdict will change things. Politics and rhetoric have created a great divide in our country. We as an organization believe in bringing people together and valuing all human life. And I hope our country can move towards that too. And with that, I'll open up to questions.
The first hand up is for Hal.
Hi, Chris. Thank you for those comments. Before I ask you the football-related question I have, if I could follow up with your comments, I'm wondering how surprised, if at all, you were by the verdict. Is that what you expected at the start of this trial?
You know me, Hal, I don't dive into politics and stuff much, on camera and stuff. But I think a lot of people were very hopeful that the verdict would come down the way it did. But just being honest, that always hasn't happened. When things look like clearly something was wrong and happened in this country, and particularly with people of color, it hasn't turned out that way. So I think that was the relief. I think some of the joy, but again, it's also saddening that it takes people dying for people to realize and want change. But I was hopeful, and then when it happened, I was happy.
Thank you for that. Moving to my football question, if I could. Obviously, you made a couple of moves up and down in your first-round draft position, and there's talk that you might well have opportunities to make a further move out of 6. How likely is it, or how much more open would you be toward listening to offers for that number 6 pick after the number 5 pick is made and you have an idea of what kind of draft board you're looking at number 6?
No, I think you said it right there. I think we'll always listen to everything. We've shown that. And I think you owe it to your team and your organization to always listen to any offers that may or may not come. And at the end of the day, as the draft falls and gets towards our pick, if, someone wants to call and they make an aggressive pitch to us, we'll evaluate it, look at the board, and look at our options, and we'll make the decision that's best for the Miami Dolphins at that point.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go to Safid and then Armando.
Hey, Chris, thank you for making that statement, and thanks for taking the time to do this with us. If there's a player that's taken in the top 10 that you may feel like you missed out on, would you guys have any regrets on trading out of 3?
No, I think, when we made our move, we had targeted, a number of players that we liked, we're comfortable with getting. So I think with us, when you make a move like we did and doing what we did to get back up, we're very comfortable where we are. But again, we'll always evaluate it, and drafts change, as you know. People fall for reasons unknown, or people select players for their roster based on their needs. So, we're comfortable where we are. We feel very good where we are, and we won't have any regrets.
Second question I have for you is kind of just the opt-outs and how you view them. I look at Tua, Austin Jackson, and Noah, all having kind of something particular to them with being your first-round picks last year. Do you look at the opt-outs as something being bigger than what they are, or do you look at it as like a player has missed time due to injury or missed some experience along the way?
No, Safed, I think it's such a 2020 is such a unique year, with the pandemic, and all players have reasons for opting out, and I don't think it's right for us to hold it against any player, whether it's family or we don't know all the circumstances, until you get to this point. You talk to players, but a lot of players opted out. You also have some schools played 4 games, some played 10. You know what I mean? So, however you look at it, wasn't going to be an apples to apples comparison around. So, but for us to sit here and judge players on opt-outs for their reasons why, it's unfair, and I think it's unrealistic.
Armando?
Hi, Chris. So I'm wondering just your thoughts, your thinking for making the move, the trade, the coming down, then going back up that you did. Just your mindset for doing that.
Yeah, I think we had a number of teams call us, all through there talking about coming up to 3, and we were comfortable being where we were, and once we evaluated, and then obviously San Francisco was very aggressive. John was great dealing with. He was very open and honest, transparent, and as we worked through it, we thought that as the offers, as we talked through it, and once they gave us the offer that we were comfortable with taking, we decided it was important for us also as well to get back into that top 10. And so once it looked like San Francisco could happen, we kind of reached out to a few teams, just gauging whether they would move or not. And in Philadelphia was a very good partner working with. Howie did a good job with us in terms of what we were looking for and what we were looking to do, and I give them a lot of credit. There's a lot of teams that wanted to wait and see, and it takes guts to make a move like that. So I give San Francisco and Philadelphia both credit for doing it.
And the second part of that is, does it bother you at all that you didn't get back more for this year, that the stuff that is coming is out in the future? This year you are weakened by those trades.
I don't think we view it like that. We still have 4 picks in the in the first 2 rounds. So I just view it completely different. And we just see a difference in opinion of that. We feel very good about it, and we also added a lot of stuff for the future, including 2 picks in 2023, 2 first-round picks in 2023. So at some point, and I'm sure someone probably asked a question. We picked 3 guys in the first round last. We're going to keep adding young players and talent and growing, and we feel good. So we feel really good about how things transpired for us.
Cam and then Tolentino.
Hey, Chris, how you doing?
Good.
I know Bill Parcells was a mentor of yours, and he had the sort of saying about height, weight, speed exceptions. I'm curious maybe what your philosophy is. There's a couple smaller players in this draft, whether Devontae Smith or Jalen Waddle. How does your philosophy impact evaluating those guys?
No, I think it's all part of the evaluation, but every player tells their own story. Is a different player, So I think, the league has changed as well. There's more rules. It's more of an offensive league. I think what's been evident is that there are a lot of smaller players that have become really good players in this league as well. So you always value it. You always talk about it. But again, each player is their own case. And, those guys have shown that they've been good players, at a high level of play in the SEC. But that goes for a lot of players around the country. I just think the game has changed a little bit, and I think these smaller players are given more room and freedom to showcase their talents.
If I could follow up on that, we've kind of talked to you a little bit previously about playmakers, and you talked about wanting to get more playmakers. How much do you grade what Tua's skill set is and what maybe fits best for him versus what you guys view as the best prospect overall?
Yeah, I think, especially when you're picking up where we're picking, and you're always looking at your team, and Tua is a big part of that. And so as we build around and what we're doing, you're always looking at, what does your quarterback do best, but you're also looking at weighing that versus, the best players available and what you do for your team. Because at the end of the day, it's always about the team. It's not about one player, one pick, one person. And, you've heard Brian talk about, team first players that fit right. So for us, it is. It's just looking for the right player, the right person, the right fit for our team, as well as, the mesh with the quarterback.
Josh?
Hey, Chris, appreciate the comments up top and including your, addressing injustice everywhere and specifically hate against Asians. As for my question, it's about Tua. At the end of the season, you said you were very happy with his development. I wanted to ask you for an update in regards to what's the team's communication been with him like this offseason. We've seen him post on social media training with some of, Dolphins receivers. What type of benefit do you think that has this full healthy offseason for Tua heading into next season, and just what's the communication been like with him?
No, the communication has been great. He's been around, as working hard. I know he's been working with the receivers. He's a very competitive kid, as you know, and I think coming off the injury last year with no OTAs, no mini camp, and being just thrown in right away. That's a hard transition. Especially coming through the rehab part of it he was doing. So, he's healthy now. I've seen a couple of videos. I'm not on social media very much. And he's been working very hard. I know our guys have been around that have popped in and out here. Do stuff. So he's been great with the players, and the receivers have been working. So, like I said, he's going to take the next step. The kid's been a winner everywhere he's been, and really excited for him, especially to have an off season under his belt. And I think that'll be really important for him.
Appreciate it, Chris. Thank you.
Yep.
Steve?
Hi, Chris. Regarding the pandemic protocols, how are you organizing your room, and how does it compare with normal? How close are we to getting back to normal?
We talk about that constantly, between Brian, Brandon, and, Tom, Steve, and the organization, and Kyle Johnston. And, the big thing, like you said, is trying to get back some sense of normalcy. We'll be in the draft room this year, back for the draft, but it'll be a much smaller, group following NFL protocols. But things are still different, Steve, at the end of the day. We adjust, according to the league rules, but it is different still. But I think the good thing is that we've all kind of gone through it before, so we're kind of finding ways where things can maybe work better, and working with the league to try and see which rules work best for teams going forward.
So how many people will you have in the room down here compared to normal, and how many people will you have at the draft?
At the draft, like every team, it'll just be one person goes as well. But we'll have the 10 people max as the guideline for our room here. So we'll have 10 people in the draft room.
Adam?
Chris, I appreciate you taking the time. I wanted to ask, if I could, a little bit about free agency.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to get your thoughts about, we haven't talked to you since moving on from Van Noy, and you didn't sign a big name pass rusher in free agency. That seemed to be the one position that wasn't addressed with a big name. Curious your thinking on moving on from Kyle, not spending big money on an edge rusher, and where you see that position going from here.
Yeah, no, Kyle did a good job for us last year and provided a lot of things. And, he helped us win 10 games, like a lot of players on this roster that are no longer here. Wish him the best, but for us, we had a lot of, we had some young players that were developing and we felt good about, and those guys need to get on the field. So at the end of the day, it was decision we made as an organization going through it. We always talk about, the roster at the end of the season between Brian, myself, the coaches, and the scouts. And at the end of the day, it was a move we made. And in terms of the pass rush adjusting, we feel good about it. We're like everything. We're always looking to keep upgrading. So it's just such a unique year. With the pandemic and so many teams releasing players taking 1-year deals on cheaper, below market value, I guess you could say, because of the lower salary cap. So, for us at the end of the day, we'll just keep, looking at churning over the roster, and then we'll go through the draft here, and then we'll keep looking at free agents that are on the streets as well.
And my follow-up, if I could, a number of the best defensive players in the drafts opted out last year. Miami had one, obviously Penn State had one. How do you, as a personnel department, evaluate players that opted out in 2020? Are you less likely to take risks on guys that you don't have 2020 film on? What's your thinking, particularly on the defensive side of the ball?
Yeah, like I said earlier, I don't think we can hold that against these players, and even some of the guys that played this year only played 4 or 5 games because of pandemic rules at their schools. So you go back, you watch their 19 season. I think our scouts and coaches have all done a great job of working through that process, spending time here to get to know these players. And it's a challenging year. Every team's dealing with it's the same level playing field, and at the end of the day, you just, get as much as information as you can, rely on the relationships, the scouts and coaches have with schools to really get to know these players from coaches. And at the end of the day, you really can't punish these kids because, again, it's every team and every college is so different this year in terms of games played, et cetera.
Thank you.
Yep.
Joe?
Hey, Chris, good to see you. How do you feel about the group of sort of upper echelon running backs in this year's class as you evaluate it with the group from last year?
Yeah, every year is always different. I think there's this year's class has there's good players at that position throughout the draft, just like last year. Last year I know there were no backs, I think, taken in the first round, I believe, and there was a big run in the second, third round. So, people talk about devaluing positions. At the end of the day, I think teams are always looking at their rosters and evaluating, and good players get picked where teams feel that value is for their roster. So, it's a good group of backs. At the end of the day, where they all fall, I don't know, but they're all good players, and they'll be good players in this league.
Thank you.
Mike?
Good morning, Chris. You had mentioned just briefly about right players. You have 4 picks in the top 50. The players that you're targeting, considering if you stay where you're at, are those players you feel maybe not starters immediately, but can contribute immediately?
I think it all depends on where they fall, Mike. At the end of the day, there's some of these players, they'll be starters, impact players. But again, as you've heard Brian say, and I love his statement, is like when you're coming in, no one's a starter, in April. These rookies have to come in. There's such a transition for them to learn. And I think that's why you always see guys take those huge second-year jumps, like Van Ginkel for us last year. And I think, Mike G did it a few years ago, made a jump after, rookie year, or, people were, unsure of him. And I think with all these guys, you preach patience for them a little bit, but I know because guys are first-round, second-round picks, you'd like them to be impact players right away. And they may be, but it may be subtle to where the coaching staff and the personnel staff, we all feel good about it. And you're just waiting for the public to see it. But at the end of the day, they could be starters. But again, the players make their own way and create their own jobs on the team here. And Brian's created a great environment here of competitiveness, and that's what I love about our guys here. I think that's why we won 10 games last year. Guys here generally know it's about competition and taking care of each other, and that's an important thing.
Thank you.
Yep.
We've got time for 2 more questions. We've got the next 2 hands are Omar Ruiz and Travis.
Hey, Chris. Good to see you. Thank you for taking the time, and thanks for your comments at the beginning.
Yep.
I'm curious if you had any more clarity on who's going to call plays for you this year offensively. And then the sort of follow-up to that would be how that collaborative effort has maybe influenced your evaluation of players, and whether George or Eric, their input, how that affects, the kind of players you guys are going to want next year.
Yeah, Omar. The coaching staff stuff, I'm not dodging the question, but I leave that up to Brian. It's not fair for me to come out here and talk about coaching staff stuff. So, but at the end of the day, we're familiar with George and Eric, and our communication has been great. Getting everyone on the same page, working through it has been good. And I don't think there's any issues for us if we're all being on the same page on what we're looking for and what we want to add to the team.
Travis, last question.
Hey, Chris, good morning. Thanks for doing this with us. I was curious, how much does Flo and his coaching staff's ability to develop talent, like you mentioned with Van Ginkel and Gesicki, how much does that kind of weigh into the decision to acquire as much draft capital as you guys have accumulated the last couple of years?
That's part of it. We're not afraid to make picks, Travis. At the end of the day, it's, we'll make the picks, but we have great confidence that this coaching staff has shown that they can develop players and get the best out of them. And so that's the exciting part of it, is that, listening through them, the thought process, and watching those guys coach every day, and the details that, Brian and his staff are on is what makes it fun here. And the players know that, and they appreciate it. And finding those right type of guys that love to work and do everything is very important, because we know those players can get even better. And so that's the exciting part of working with Brian and his staff.